Um, so today is Buddha's birthday, or we're celebrating it today. And I was originally going to talk about metta, loving kindness. And I was saying maybe I should come up with something about Buddha's birthday. And Chris really was helpful. He said, there's never any reason not to talk about metta. And there's every time, all sorts of reasons, overwhelming reasons to talk about metta and loving kindness. And really, they're the same thing. I mean, Buddha coming into this world was kind of an offering of loving kindness to the whole universe to us. So at Northridge, we've always chanted the Loving Kindness Sutra. Metta is Pali for loving kindness. And it's actually not been too much traditionally chanted at Zen, and now it's chanted all the time at every Zen center I know, certainly here. And I think we need it. And I think that's why we chant it all the time. And it helps us. It's always applicable, always. And now more than ever, with everything that's going on, horrors on horrors. I find for myself that most of the time I'm aware of very tense, and I'm aware people around me are very tense, and I'm very reactive, and people around me are very reactive. And when you're reactive, it's so easy to say unkind things, and others have the same thing. And I think it's so important, sometimes hard, to offer metta to ourselves and to others, and to forgive ourselves and to forgive others. And so, oh, that stopped. That's kind of nice, although the bell is nice too. I think it's very important and very helpful. A lot of love, a lot of forgiveness. And so I'm going to focus on today loving kindness for the self, which is, for me, the most hard form of loving kindness, and I think, in some ways, it's most difficult, and it's the most, in some ways, you might say it's the most important. I mean, if we don't love ourselves, what do we have to offer to anyone? I mean, where can we find compassion and joy and equanimity if we don't love ourselves? And so it's metta has been always very important to me. I was first introduced to it by a teacher. I was at a point in my practice in life where I was very in pain, very raw. And she said, "Why don't you read the book Loving Kindness by by Sharon Salzberg?" And I did, and I started to practice metta, and it changed my life, and in some sense saved my life too. I recommend it if you don't know about it or haven't read it, and you feel things are hard. I'd suggest you check it out. Loving Kindness by Sharon Salzberg. And there are also videos of her talking about loving kindness on the net. And the first practice is traditionally loving kindness to the self, going on to loving kindness to others, to friends, then more and more towards people you don't like. And, but you start with that. So I started with that. And so I asked, it was weird because in loving kindness, what you do, in traditional practice, you offer yourselves phrases. And so traditionally you would say something like, "May I be safe, happy, healthy, live at ease." And you repeat that again and again and return to it when you drift off. And so I asked my teacher, I said, "Well, in traditional Zen practice, you try to let go of thoughts, and here you're adding thoughts." And she just said, don't worry about it, just do it. And then I said, well, should I do this in zazen posture? And she says, do it in the fetal position. And I always get teary-eyed. So it's always been very important to me. And so I've been in the last week, of course, preparing for this talk and watching videos about Sharon Salzberg on the web, talking about loving kindness and loving kindness to the self. At the same time, I started reading through Thich Nhat Hanh's commentary on the Nagarjuna with a friend of mine, like down the about a minute away walking, and that's been great. We just got going, and they came together, and it was helpful for me. So I'll offer this, and this is kind of an adventure, and take it as that. It's like we usually tell we're taught, let go of thoughts, pay attention to your thoughts and let them go. And that's very, very good advice. And we should all be doing it all the time. But I was saying, I realized reading Nagarjuna that actually paying attention is the activity of a self. You need a self. The self pays attention. And so what would it look like if you were in something like the same state of mind, and that was happening, but it was kind of more like a state of, openness where it's just sort of a default thing that you notice thoughts, let go. Notice thoughts, let go. And it's not something that happens often in practice at all. But when we relax, it can happen. And it's kind of a different kind of state. And Sharon, in one of these videos, she said, just relax into the breath. And that was very helpful. And that kind of brought up this kind of thinking about practice, this effort to simply relax into the breath. It's not exactly an effort, or the effort falls away into just who you are, into what's happening right now, is being there. Thoughts arise, and there they are, and you let them go and rest. Rest into the thought, rest into the breath. And continue, again, from something that she said, there's only one thought. You say, what does that mean? There's only one breath. She said, there's only one breath. And if you think about it, at any one time, there's a breath. That's the only one. There's no other time happening. It's that time. And that time is, in Buddhism, we say something like, in 1 second, there are 84,000 instance. And in each that's in terms of our mind. We're breathing in more than one instant. But in terms of this idea of one breath, there's one breath at a time that is happening, and it's born and dying, and then there's the next breath that's happening. And that is happening all the time. And so we can think, one breath, or one moment, rest. One moment, rest. One moment, rest. And we can think, one breath, rest. One breath, rest. One breath, rest. Thich Nhat Hanh has this expression that breathing in is arriving and breathing out is being at home. And we can think of, I find that very powerful and helpful. So we breathe in, we're arriving. We breathe out, we're at home. And that just happens again and again and again, all the time. And I think maybe you can call that the pure form of loving kindness to the self. And that can happen. And that's our adventure. And at the same time as that's happening all the time, lots of other stuff is happening all the time. Uh, and so that's a good thing. Uh, for instance, we cross the street. We need to be aware of things other than the breath moment to moment. We need to be aware we're crossing the street. I'd better be conscious I'm walking into the street, look to the right, to the left, see if there are cars coming, and pay attention to the sounds of possibly other cars are coming. Pay attention to if anyone else is crossing the street, if a child is, if an old person is. And at the same time, we keep talking to our friends. So we do, and at the same time, we keep breathing. So it's all happening at once. And we're aware of it, and we don't think too much about it. We all pretty much successfully cross streets. And so that's a good thing. And the problem becomes when all these things that we grab onto them and make a movie of it. And the main character of the movie is almost always ourselves. And that's where we get in trouble. Because the child crossing the street that we have to be aware of is the child crossing the street. Our movie, our fantasy, oh my God, something happens, the car comes, and we save the child, is a movie. It's not happening. But we get grabbed into that in our minds. And there's so many movies. There are rom-coms, and there are action movies, and there are horror movies. And now we're offered 6 or 7 or 8 absolute horror movies every day, and surrounded by garish, advertising, very enticing. And so we try not to grab onto those movies, and it's hard. And imagine grabbing on. I grab onto several at once sometimes. I imagine this and this and this horrible thing happening, and I'm in the middle of 4 horror movies at once. And when that happens, I notice that as a conscientious sense student, I say, oh, I'm supposed to let go of these movies, let go of the thoughts. And I'm not. And then I get a little tense, and then I say, as a conscientious sense student, I'm not doing it right. And then I say, I'm failing. And then I say, I must be a horrible person. And then I'm a cycle of making it all worse. And none of it is real. And none of it is real. And so this thing, when we can relax, give ourselves space, not easy to do, but can get into a kind of default through a lot of practice, through many years of, oh, I just thought, it takes a split second, and in saying it, you can't be a split second, but I'm a bad Zen student. I'm grabbing onto the thought. Space, breath. And then maybe I'm less likely to go on to a terrible failure or whatever I go to, and then the next and the next. And that might be called sort of the something like the everyday loving kindness to yourself. Um, and so, and in terms of this kind of thinking, I'm a terrible Zen student and all that. Uh, Listen to the tone of voice towards yourself. Um, just listen to yourself, talk to yourself. Listen to yourself, talk to others too. Am I angry? How loud am I shouting at myself? And just give it space, rest. And that I find helpful. And so this is loving kindness to the self. And we go on in traditional practices, and I think they're all included in this actually. Um, uh, and so Hosan, our beloved abbot at Berkeley, who just recently died, would always say, when you offer loving kindness to yourself, when you offer loving kindness in general, you're offering loving kindness to the beings in your own mind. That we eventually, at an advanced stage of loving kindness practice, you offer loving kindness to your enemy. But we're often our worst enemy, very often. So offer loving kindness to ourselves when we're our worst enemy. Offer loving kindness to that self. A little before you offer loving kindness to someone whom you're indifferent. So a lot of times we think of ourselves as, oh well, offer loving kindness to the self that is indifferent to the self. And we sometimes are okay with ourselves. And so offer loving kindness to the self that's okay to yourself. And again, I say inside or outside, those are concepts. And essentially, it's the whole mess put together. All these selves, all this outside, all this stuff inside. And so, we call that big self. It's all part of one big mess. And that's okay. And ultimately, here there's all these concepts. And I'm talking about these concepts, or words or concepts inherently. And so, they talk about the final night of Buddha under the Bodhi tree. They talk about four watches. And the first three you say a lot of words about, like there are these women who tempt him, Mara offers him challenges, people come in and fight him and, shoot arrows at him. And the fourth watch, there's absolutely nothing you can say. He sees the morning star. That's it. Nothing you can. It's the speechless fourth watch. And there's no words for it. So, I'd suggest stop worrying about the morning star totally and just practice moment for moment, returning to the breath and loving yourself and bringing yourself back to the breath, bringing yourself back to resting, to arriving, to coming home, and just being there and doing the best you can. So, thank you very much. So, are there questions, comments? Please.
Hi, Joel. This is June.
Hi, June. Good to see you.
Yes, it was so great to see you at Green Gulch, too.
I know, that was great. Green Gulch was wonderful.
Yes, and thank you so much for your talk today. It was so relevant to what I've been dealing with lately, and it really spoke to me, and it was exactly what I needed to hear this morning. Thank you.
Well, that's so wonderful. That makes me feel really great. And so tell me what you've been doing, what you've been trying to do. You're
Yes,
saying,
yeah, I was thinking about how I've been feeling like I'm not good enough. And when you said like there are parts of yourself that's indifferent to yourself, and then there's a part that's okay with yourself, and you can offer loving kindness to those parts. I thought that was really great way to practice. And
yeah,
I'm gonna be doing that, and I really needed to hear that. So yeah, thank you.
thank you so much. Okay. Okay. Hi, Spencer.
Well, thank you, Joel. That was really wonderful. Um, you know, Sometimes people perceive Zen practice as cold and detached. Um, I have found that through metta, I've found an intimacy with myself, and that voice softens, right?
Yeah, right.
Um, I found I could actually hear my own heart,
Yeah.
um, which is very revealing. Uh, you know, um, you mentioned at the beginning of the talk that your teacher said that you could do metta in a fetal position, and I know you could do metta in many positions. And being kind to yourself, no matter what arises during your metta, is paramount. But I was hoping you could speak to that.
Well, yeah, thanks. Great. Uh, I would say I was very interested to hearing your heart and what arises when you hear your heart. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. I During a metta meditation, I feel a spaciousness in my chest. I feel like I'm breathing from my heart,
Yeah,
and that allows me to maybe broadcast at that point, uh, because I feel like I've broken the envelope of myself,
yeah,
and that spaciousness I'm able to put forth,
yeah,
and it's all my mind, but it's very comforting to my heart, and
right.
that's the feeling.
That's wonderful. You can, it's like, well, I forget the word you used, um, and it's just manifested there. It's not something that somehow is manufactured, that has
Mm.
happened. It's something that it's just there. I mean, it's like the meta didn't manufacture it. It wasn't manufactured. It was sort of uncovered. I mean, that kind of heart is always there. It's just covered up by all sorts of stuff. And so, they have the traditional benefits of metta. And one is something like you're radiant. And it's not like you say, oh, I'm radiant. And it's not like you say, oh, I've practiced, so now I'm radiant. You're just radiant. You don't think very much about it. I mean, Mel was radiant. Peter was radiant. You know, he wasn't thinking, oh, I'm doing this or that. He was just Peter. Peter was radiant. He's radiating peacefulness and love. And when he was pissed off, he was radiating peacefulness and love. And so it becomes a very natural state. And so, you have this feeling, this warm feeling, just wonderful. No need to grab and talk about it to yourself or anyone else. That's wonderful, and it's going to manifest, you know. So there's, so I think it's beautiful, and I think I just say it's going to happen, and it's happening, and let it all go and radiate to others. Okay? Okay,
Thank you, Joe.
you bet. Okay. Oh, Mark, you have the fancy hand. Hi. Hi.
Yes, I know where that came from. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great.
Okay. I really appreciate sharing with us the that simple thing of an in-breath being I'm arriving, and then the exhale is I'm at rest or I'm at home.
Yeah, right.
And I find myself racing around in my car so much these days, trying to arrive at a time that kind of stretch out for me, but it seems to compress. And I think if I can do that, if I could just do that breathing while driving and that allowing that I'm arriving and I'm home,
Yeah, exactly.
bring me down out of this habitual mind thing that I jump into. And
Right.
I think, and if I'm in the grocery store, I'm anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like the handy, it's like a Kleenex. You just pull it out of your pocket and you blow your anxiety into it and you settle yourself down. It's just that simple thing, I think, would make the world, if we all did it, would make the world so much better. But my world is going to be better because of that.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you very much. And you're arriving at every moment, really. It's like you're not sort of in transit and then you've arrived at the grocery store. You know, it's like, isn't that wonderful? I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh, he's always so great. You know, every time you're an out breath, you're arriving. That's what it is. And so that I like that. And you can, remember that as clear your mind. So I think actually that's kind of just a different way of saying what you were already saying. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but so I think
Yes.
that's, yeah. So it's,
I just I think if you do it enough, a simple thing like that, just a simple thing
yes,
can change your everyday moment, which is where we forget we're actually, human beings. We have these moments where we become the horror show, or all different movies in our heads because it's regular life. That's what we do.
yeah,
And I think this is a great way to develop that habit, and
yeah,
then it just automatically pops up, and then you don't bring the movie to people. You bring
either way.
the sanity.
You'll bring the horror movie, or you'll bring the happy movie, or you'll bring the sanity. Whatever is happening inside you, you're going to bring to the other people. So when you're feeling that metta, you're going to bring radiance. And when that's not feeling, when you are metta, you are radiant. And when you're peaceful, you bring peace. And so I think it's really, I don't know, I find making a deal of it in a way, it sort of is a trap, just, it's like at one point you say it becomes a habit. And I think that we have all sorts of habits, and we have a habit of grabbing stuff, which is not a great habit. So we can try to get a habit of releasing whatever's arising.
I think you're right, and I don't think it sounds like it could become habitual learning or a pattern, or it could mean that you're creating thoughts and forms extra in your life. I think it's actually the step to decreasing
Right.
with the right habits, just reprogramming our movie mind, which is
Yeah, right.
time.
Let's simply notice that, just
Yeah.
that, and then drop the whole thing. Oh,
Yes.
movie, drop it, rest, give yourself space.
Yeah.
Okay, I think, yeah, thanks. I think, John, you were yeah, you had your hand up there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Joel. It's good to see you. I haven't
Great to
seen
see
you in
you.
some time.
Yeah.
Great to see you. And thank you so much. I really appreciated your thoughts. And I also appreciated you sharing the thoughts of Hozan and his commentary that sometimes the best way to give loving kindness to ourselves is to put loving kindness out into the world. And I really love that because I do think sometimes it's so hard for us to give loving kindness to ourselves. And I've definitely found in my own practice as I've integrated Metta into my own practice over the last number of years, and I've kind of made it an anchor to my daily walking life
Right.
that that truly has in and of itself, it just feeds my own, loving kindness to myself. And, I have a little prayer I say every day. I ask that my own heart and the hearts of everyone are filled with loving kindness, that we can share that loving kindness with others and relieve their suffering. And I think when we do that, it really has a profound effect on us. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That's great. And Thich Nhat Hanh has all sorts of gathas for every occasion, which I find very helpful. And they're all basically that. And yeah, I think that's absolutely wonderful. That's great. Thank you. Okay. Uh, yeah, Jane.
Joel, thank you for your talk. You had many good points in it, and I especially like when you said that Peter isn't past, because I don't think of him as past either. I
Right.
think of him as radiant present also.
Yes.
So, yeah, I really appreciated that. I
Yes.
think the subject of metta is a wonderful subject, something we can all practice a lot. And your many ideas for practicing were really helpful.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad.
I think when we practice loving kindness to others, no matter who we meet, if someone has a lot of suffering inside and they want to give it to us with words, we accept it and we're grateful for it because it's energy and it's part of another person. So we receive it with gratitude, and we can let it go because we're not attached to it. Like the person who is suffering is attached to it. So when we receive it, we take a burden off of them. And I think that's a really good way to practice loving kindness to everybody.
Well, thank you, Jane. That's wonderful. That I have to say, I mean, that's marvelous. And I need to work on that because
Like
when
you are.
well, I'm trying to, but it's true. I mean, I realize that that is often a trap to me. Like I said at the beginning, how in my tense reactive state, I'm conscious of doing things that could be and probably are hurtful to others, and I see others whom I know are very loving doing that also. And so I tend to I realize what Jane said, I get trapped in a movie about it, like I get pissed off. And I get trapped in a movie of being pissed off. And that's marvelous. It's very helpful. Yeah.
And you
That's
probably find others receiving that from you and just letting it go, and then you feel good when you leave them.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's true. I think that sometimes that happens. I think it's my experience, it's kind of a rare thing. I should hang out with more at more Zen centers more times. But even there you have that. But certainly I can try to remember to practice that. I mean, it's sort of like, I mean, it's like part of the compassion side and the equanimity side, which are other aspects of metta practice, that, uh, uh, you know, as you say, like someone who is in an angry state or whatever, is suffering tremendously. And we might be able to know that and offer loving kindness to a very much a suffering being. And that will really help us. And
Yes.
any tips about how to better remember to do that?
Which is, you actually talked in such a way that it made me think you do remember all the time. You have many ways to remember. It's just if you get angry, that's the horror movie you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. But if you get angry, you just offer loving kindness to yourself.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, it's so helpful, Jan. This is great. I mean, it's like, I mean, I can say I wanna that he who shall not be named is suffering tremendously, and I know it's true. And uh, I mean, that's the horror movie I was thinking about. Um, and I can intellectually know that's true. And uh, I personally, in that situation, find it very hard to go beyond that. It's
Well,
very,
but Joel, when you feel really angry about someone and you talk to another person, just observe how you feel when you leave them. And you might find there's a lot of people who are practicing the same metta. And
yes. Well,
many people, I had an experience where I think a lot of people experience things like this and don't know often that they are, but they do it. Maybe they are aware. For example, about 20 years ago, I came home from Japan to visit my family, and I went out with my father and mother to the grocery store, believing I was, like a cohort with them shopping. But my father began saying, "No, we don't use this. No, we don't use that. No, we don't want this. No, we don't want that." And my mother saying, "Yeah, we don't want this or that." And so all of a sudden I felt like a 10-year-old again.
right.
And I got very angry and I left the store and went into the place in the section where there was a table and sat down there, and I thought I'll just calm down. But I was sitting there feeling angry. And a
Right.
woman came walking in with a glass of water and put it on. She said, "I thought you might like a glass of water." And I thought that was the nicest thing. She
Right.
just came in, interrupted my ranting inside. I
Right.
picked up the glass and I drank the water, and afterwards I felt really good enough to go back and help my mother and father instead of resisting them.
That's
So,
marvelous.
you know, she was some kind of beautiful being who came in and just said, "I thought you might like a glass of water."
Oh, that is so great.
And all of a sudden, all the ranting just kind of disappeared while I drank the water, and then I felt really good.
Yes. Well,
Oh,
she was manifesting that. She was seeing your pain and
yeah, she
bringing
saw
you.
my discomfort and came in and offered some relief, and it was a fantastic relief.
Yes.
And I think many people are like that everywhere.
Oh, that's
And
absolutely true.
don't
Uh,
notice it, We just feel good, then bad, then good, then bad. We don't notice why did we feel good. And I think it's because the world is full of bright people.
yeah. Well, I mean, as I practice, I think I'm getting kind of somewhat better at that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a difference between like seeing someone suffering and feeling the suffering vented at me. And seeing someone suffering, then I try most of the time, I hope, to offer the glass of water.
Yeah.
And and that makes me feel really good. And and also I think that more and more I'm able, say something has happened and I'm pissed at someone, and it's become a bit of a movie. And I run into a friend, and I say, "Oh, hi," you know, and that stops. And what's happening is, "Hey, sure, hey, how are you?" Um, and so I can let it go. But if I encounter, well, it would be interesting to, if I then encountered the person who pissed me off, I think I'd try. But, so, this is really helpful for me. It gets me really thinking about this. I gotta talk, we gotta do jokes on about this. This is really, really helpful.
I think if somebody vents at you,
Yeah,
you leave it without venting in return. You're doing an incredible kindness to that person. You're receiving all of it and you're not resisting any of it. So you just receive it and you can let it go again because you're not attached to it like the person who is venting is. So that's a terrible danger when people vent like that. So when you do that, it's like you're preventing a guy from walking in front of a truck.
yes, you are. And you're loving kindness to them and to yourself, because when you're in that state, you might run into a truck.
Yes,
I mean, and that's something that I need to work on, and I see that I can. Like this one thing, being aware, I mean, that's sort of a prerequisite to be aware, gee, I'm really pissed, I'm really in a reactive state, and then to make a certain effort not to manifest that in action. And the action could be, I'm in a state of suffering, and let me relieve my own suffering at that moment.
yeah,
And that's a gift to me. It's also a gift to the other person.
yes,
Stops the karma.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's like if somebody is passing around to other people something really terrible. Like we used to play games as children, one potato, two potato. What was it? It was like a hot potato, but you pass it to the next person, or you can choose not to pass it. You can choose to stop it right in its tracks by just letting it be. So
Yeah.
when you practice that metta with another person who's venting, you are kind of saving them in a big way because venting really is a terrible state.
It is. It is a terrible state. Thank you so much. Well, I've been meaning to give you a call in any case, but we'll do that and we continue this. This is tremendously helpful. Thank you, Jane.
Well, your talk was very helpful, Joel.
You're always very helpful.
No, your talk was very helpful. You
I'm
made
so
many
glad.
very good points in it for people to think about, at least for me to think about. A lot of good points.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, love you. And to be continued big time soon. Okay, thank you. Chris has his hand up. Chris?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So, a few thoughts were coming up listening to you. Um, but the first thing I just wanted to say is how much you kept reminding me of one of the phrases of a bodhisattva known as RuPaul, who always said, "If you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love anyone else?"
It's true, absolutely.
It's really hard for me to practice metta or any kind of positive practice to myself without thinking a little bit about that phrase, and that's kind of that actually is a really good motivator. Just sort of remembering that little gatha.
Yeah,
To-
absolutely. Thank you. I'll need to do that too. Yeah. Uh,
You also reminded me of when you said something like how we can be our own worst enemy.
absolutely.
That made me think, well, maybe that's why it can be so hard for me to practice metta to myself.
Yeah.
Is because I'm so often at odds with myself. I'm so often loath to accept myself for who I am. And applying love or loving kindness towards something, I think engenders respect, acceptance, acceptance of what they are. And again, as always, acceptance does not mean you like it, does not mean you approve of it. Although that is, a worthwhile question for me to ask myself is this really so despicable that I can't accept and maybe even approve it? Whatever it is. And when it's a horror movie, it's really, really hard to accept.
Yeah.
But I notice sometimes my thoughts sound like, a 3-year-old, sometimes they sound like a 15-year-old, and sometimes they sound like Buddha.
That's
And
right.
when I'm self-talking and saying like, hey, good job doing that thing that you just did, where you talked yourself down or you talked yourself out of a horror film. I noticed what was going on. I took myself out of it, and rather than just sort of beating myself up for having got there in the first place, to really focus on I did a good mature thing just now.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's
When I speak to myself that way, when I can frame my thoughts about myself that way, I feel like I'm getting closer to sounding more like Buddha in my own head. And I think that's a fruit of practice, and I think that we're all going that direction the more we practice Zen.
Yeah, we are. That's marvelous. That's marvelous. It's like, it reminds me of how, I'm terrible about when I'm my own worst enemy, berating myself and like saying how horrible and having so little metta for myself and so little metta for the part of myself that was at that moment my own worst enemy. And it's just sort of, it's really a movie I'm into personally, and I think it's so important it's so helpful. It's just sort of, and just beginning the last little bit of, that was, the best you knew how, and it's forgive yourself, but it's even more, it's love yourself. It's like this unconditional love for yourself. It doesn't mean you approve everything you did, but there's unconditional love for yourself. And that can then be extended beyond. But that's real hardcore, amazing bodhisattva stuff. I don't know how much time we have. I'll just, I want to bring up, like, when you said, like, bodhisattva, the rupa, or that Alan Hozan, was a wonderful folk singer, and I don't know who made it up, some Zeni, I guess. There's the Bodhisattva never despise. I think it's in the Lotus Sutra. And his whole thing was he's never despising anyone, however badly they treat him. And that in the story and the song, like the practitioners at that time, it was real degenerate, and they were I'm such a great practitioner and you're a jerk. And they threw rocks at him and all this stuff. And he would just go a safe distance away and then say back, I love you. You're going to all be Buddhas one day, And it's like inconceivable. The Buddha never despised. I'm not despising you. And we can have that feeling towards the parts of ourselves that are throwing stones at us or at other people. And we can love the parts of ourselves when we realize that we threw stones at other people and thereby really messed ourselves up. Yeah, check it out. It's on a CD Alan has calling Everything's Broken. It's a marvelous CD. It was funny because we both came out with CDs at around the same time. And his CD was called Everything's Broken, and my CD was called Lament Amid Silence. And we said, "Oh my God, what are we doing for the image of Zen? This is terrible." And it was funny. Yeah, terrific. Yeah, great.
We should probably move into the
Yeah,
service part, and so that we can all love ourselves even more.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful. Like, uh, at, I love the ceremony, and everyone, often they say to each other, "Happy birthday," you know, like, "Happy birthday, Mark. Happy birthday, Chris. Happy birthday, Jane." And there's that real feeling about it. So I think, great, let's go on to the ceremony.
Well, then, happy birthday.
Happy birthday to all of you.
Yeah, there.